So good morning, everyone. Somehow I feel particularly happy to sit here today, happy and content somehow, which maybe I shouldn't be, because I don't have a talk really thought out. I'm just here, and I debated whether to just take questions today. It seems like it's nice to do that periodically. And but there is something that I would like to talk about that I think I'd enjoy talking about. It just hasn't been formulated. So I might bore you as I find my way. But it's this wonderful, for me, wonderful topic of our thinking. And over the years of practice, my relationship to thinking has changed and has deepened and expanded in all kinds of interesting ways, for me at least. And that, and I would say that I have a very friendly relationship with my thinking world, my thinking, that I think a lot of people can't say. I couldn't have said that when I was younger. But also, it's friendly in there. I feel like mostly my thoughts are friendly thoughts, and they're characterized by that. I don't feel particularly challenged by the thoughts that I have, and I kind of sometimes delight in them and appreciate them, and also don't, I've learned over the years of practice to not give a lot of authority to them. So that makes it easier to have a much simpler relationship to them. I think it's very easy, because I've had this plenty in my life, of having thoughts that were compulsive, that there was stress involved in the very thoughts that I had. And to some point become free of that is a wonderful thing. It's a possibility for all of us. Though some people, they're living so long, or I did this, certainly lived so long in thought streams that were just taken for granted, just assumed to be normal. That's what life is. Sometimes, this famous quote, I think, therefore I am, is, I think, points to, at least for some of us, that we identify with ourselves, our thinking. It's like who I am is my thinking. And so if I think it must be right, or it must be me, or this must be the real thing. Certainly my thinking happens to me. I mean, I take responsibility for it, but I don't identify myself with it. It's not like who I am. It's just kind of like an appendage sometimes, and maybe no different than some of you, maybe when you clip off your fingernails. Once your fingernails are on, I don't know, where the counter or wherever you put them, wherever they fall, you probably don't look at them and say, oh, that's me. I better save them, and you gather them up and you go around, and you probably get a locket, a glass locket that you carry with you, and so you can show people, like you probably have it right over your heart, and you show people like, oh, here, look. Mostly once they're clipped, it's like, oh, I think for many people it's like the relationship to clipped fingernails, is pretty light, pretty, I bet there's not much compulsion except like, where's the right place to throw them away? And so thoughts, can we have that kind of light, easy relationship with thoughts where we don't identify them because we think it doesn't mean that's you. It doesn't mean you have to define yourself by the thoughts that you have. And so a big part of this for mindfulness practitioners is, in fact, to learn to be mindful of thinking. It's not easy, because sometimes thinking is the filter through which we see the world. We don't see the filter. But over time, we can slowly become more and more cognizant of our thinking, how we think. Different people think in different ways. Some people, it's clearly in words and a voice in the head that speaks. Some people, it's in images a lot that they think. Some people, there are other ways. There's their primary way of knowing or processing or understanding. And so to first become aware of how, what is your way of understanding your life? How does understanding arise for you? And then notice whether it's stressful or not. Notice that if it kind of feels heavy or dense or contracted, whether it feels agitated, the way that you know, the way that you think. And are there different circumstances in your life where thinking is more likely to be stressful, and other circumstances where it's actually kind of nice to think, you enjoy it? Maybe some people, when they're alone, they enjoy their thoughts more. Some people, when they're alone, are oppressed more by their thoughts. Some people in the shower enjoy their thoughts because finally that's a place to sing, and even if you can't sing, and they just kind of be. There's all kinds of different kind of scenarios. So to understand the different contexts for how we think, and to begin appreciating their differences. And once you understand there are different ways of thinking and different qualities of thinking, then to appreciate that the way you think is somewhat optional. That you might have options that to think differently. Maybe think without stress, without compulsivity, without getting identified with your thoughts. This is who I am. And then also to appreciate there are different kinds of thinking. And the one that I think Buddhism practice wants to address the most is what I call discursive thinking. And this is a thinking that is storytelling, carrying on a discourse, a conversation in the mind. Sometimes we're having conversations with other people, reviewing what we said yesterday to figure out a better reply that we didn't give yesterday, or planning ahead for a conversation you're going to have, and if that person says X, I'm going to say Y, but they say this, kind of figuring out what's the best thing to say in a situation. Sometimes there's stressful situations, like you have to go talk with a boss in a difficult conversation, or have a challenging conversation with a friend, or you're going to show up and meet with one-on-one with a Buddhist teacher, which is, for some people, they rehearse for that. They're planning it out. And and sometimes that's where the opinions come. We have opinions, ideas, commentary to make about things. Wow, look at that person. Those shoes are just not up to snuff. How could those people be wearing those shoes? Or on and on. My son, I just learned last night, my son is going to a Kendom party. And so that's only something I learned about this last week. A Kendom party. We should all go to Kendom parties. No? I have no idea what's happening at that kind of party, but I didn't know what to think. So I didn't have any commentary about it. I was just kind of like, wow. Maybe this is an anti-patriarchy party. That would be nice. Anyway, so he went to the basement and dug out. My wife helped him dig out all the pink clothes that he had in storage. Because periodically in his life he liked pink clothes. And so he didn't forget he had them. So apparently that was necessary for this party. So, so commentary, judgments. Oh no, a young man should not wear pink. That's not quite up. That's not right. Maybe it should be blue. That's right. So the mind makes these stories, right, and lives in these stories, and and those stories can be have very strong emotions connected to them, very strong fear connected to them, very strong anger connected to them, very strong kind of criticism of self and others. And so the discursive mind, the storytelling mind, can have a huge impact on ourselves and a huge impact on others. And on ourselves, the story-making mind is, because it's often very repetitive, We repeat over and over again the same kind of story, idea, theme. And as it's repeated, the emotional impact of them gets repeated as well. So if we're constantly telling stories about how terrible we are, then slowly that wears us away, and we start getting depressed or exhausted, or just we shrink and contract in some deep way. If we keep telling ourselves stories which are lies about how fantastic we are, delusions of grandeur, and then we start, telling that to everyone else, we might believe the delusion, the conceit around it, which is also very stressful at least for others, but maybe for ourselves. So the stories we tell repeatedly have a big impact on us. And so we want to be careful what we say. And we want to live in the storytelling mind. Our storytelling mind's a little bit of a fantasy. Even if we're predicting the future or remembering the past. Some people love to remember the past, and it brings some people a great delight, which is wonderful and can be very, very healthy part of their life. But sometimes the memories of the past are hard, and sometimes the memories of the past are not accurate. And so, are we weighed down by them? What's the effect these stories, the discursive mind has? And I think there's a lot of suffering from the discursive mind, a lot of stress that comes from that. And so, and to live in that as if that's the way to be is, I think, unfortunately, how many people think or just assume. And it's never been questioned. It's just, this is the way things are. Reality has been built this way. And the way I see the world through these stories must be true, because I'm seeing it through those filters, and so it must be true. So one of the phenomenal things that can happen from meditation practice, I think most meditation practice, is the calming of the thinking mind, so that we discover that we can breathe and be alive and be happy or just experience life without that discursive mind running. It's kind of like the hum of the refrigerator has gone off, and we didn't even know it was on until it went off, and that feels good. And so to have the discursive running mind, that feels good. And not a few people, that's why they cherish meditation, because it's the one place where that thinking mind gets quiet enough that it's not so stressful, not so oppressive, not just kind of constantly churning and churning. And so just in meditation, it calms down, quiets down. And for our practice of mindfulness meditation, it's not just to have a quiet mind or a calm mind and get that relief. It's to have that calmness as a vantage point to become wiser about how we think. To use that as a orientation, the calmness, to then look at our thinking more carefully. When the thinking mind begins again, how am I thinking? What's the quality of my thinking? What's the primary themes that what I think? Not a few people only discover the themes of their thinking when they go on a meditation retreat. Because for 7 days, maybe, there's very little stimulus that usually keeps us distracted. You don't have the radio or the TV on or your computer on. Some people have multiple things on at the same time, like my son. I've seen him with 3 monitors that he's tracking, and he seems to be able to do it. He's also figured out to listen to, they record all the classes in college, and so he doesn't listen in class. He doesn't even go to class sometimes. And he says that professors talk too slow, so not interested. It's like my mind wanders off, and I talk to people next to me, or I'm on my phone. But what I've learned is that I learn much better if I listen to the recordings, because I put them on 2 or 3 times speed. And then I have to really pay attention. And then I learn. So anyway, who am I to say that he shouldn't have 3 monitors on and tracking them all if he can, who knows? Maybe there's a whole new generation of people born with evolving into different brains. Maybe most of us are the old version of somehow. Evolution continues, right? So, but to see the repetition on a retreat, to see how we don't have the distractions that we don't normally have, or the interruptions, to spend hours at a time on retreat just left with yourself and looking at yourself and seeing yourself. And sometimes it's a little bit distressing for people, or for some people very distressing, to finally discover what goes on in there. I had no idea that this is what I was thinking all the time. This is terrible. Or, wow, I'm better than I thought I was. That's less often than the first. and to just, and so some people discover how much they are afraid, because all their thoughts, most of their thoughts are, the themes is so much fear, worried about this, worried about that, worried about that. Some people discover how much they're trying to escape and run away by going into fantasy. Some people discover how much they're driven by desire, or sexual desire, because they have fantasies galore. And so it goes on and on. So it goes, so the themes. And so, wow, I had no idea that this is what drives my mind and what goes on all the time if the mind is left to itself. That's considered really fantastic for insight meditation, to start seeing, oh, this is how it is. This is how it is. And for the purposes of insight meditation, there's absolutely no need for shame. No need even for embarrassment, though occasionally it's embarrassing. You want to be able to see it clearly and learn not to define yourself by it. And this defining ourselves by the thoughts we have is a tremendous source of suffering. So then we slowly kind of begin to not be so committed to our thinking mind, discursive mind. We're not so focused on it or interested in it. And that makes a big difference. There's no switch to turn it off. So it's hard to kind of just say, I have to stop. But it is possible to lose interest in it. And as we lose interest to it, it can kind of recede into the background. It doesn't have us by the throat or by the nose. And it just kind of does its thing, and we can be more present in other ways. Also, when we start seeing the quality and the characteristics of our descriptive thought, we're thinking all the time, it's possible to change what we think, and to change the stream of our thoughts. If the thoughts are always ones of doubt, try out intentionally thinking thoughts of confidence. Think about the things that in your life that you're confident about, and that could be the most mundane, simple thing that you can ever imagine. You have some confidence, you know how to put on your shoes. Some people that's a challenge, but that's an example of something very simple. You have confidence that you know which drawer to put your silverware in. You never think about this; it's done on automatic pilot. But to start thinking about what you have confidence in that's small, and then slowly expand it, and get a sense of what it feels like to think confident thoughts, as opposed to always thinking doubtful thoughts. If you have mean thoughts, cynical thoughts, try out having kind thoughts. It doesn't have to be insincere ones. Maybe there are certain things you have kindness for. The neighbor's dog. When you see it, you just want to, you fall in love or something. So begin where you can and start having kind thoughts regularly, and see what that's like. Now, when I was a new Zen student, new Buddhist practitioner, I would have thought that anything like that was artificial. Anything like that was kind of like painting a saccharine picture of the world. Well, maybe it is, but it doesn't have to be. But more importantly, is it the better alternative? Is it better to continue with the meanness? Is it better to continue with the doubt than it is to insert, maybe 10% of the time, thoughts of confidence, thoughts of goodwill, thoughts of kindness. And what happens? How does that influence you? How does that condition you? How does that change you? So this begins shifting our relationship to thinking. And this shifting relationship to discursive thought begins allowing us to not to put it down, to not be identified with it. And then we can start, with, especially with the help of meditation, start discerning that there are other ways of knowing, that there's other ways of thinking than discursive thinking. And it's fantastic to start discovering that certain that there can be knowing something before you think it. And maybe it's obvious to some of you, but for me that was a great discovery. And as I kind of got wind of it. Wait a minute here. Why do I was focused on thinking as being what told me what was going on in life. And then I noticed that, wait, when things are quiet, there's a knowing there before I think. Why do I think I have to think? What if maybe I just content with that knowing? And it turns out we know a lot of things without thinking. So I think all of you are going to leave, when you leave here, through one of the doors that we have. You know it's a door. I bet none of you are going to try to leave through the windows. It wouldn't occur to you. Maybe I told you, now some of you will try. But you know that if you want to leave, you go through a door. But I suspect you don't think that. You're not planning ahead. Now I'm in this building. Buildings have doors. Doors are the ways to get out. But do the doors big enough? Are they small enough? Do I have the right clothes to go through the door? You don't think about the door, but you know it's a door. That's a knowing which exists somehow in the cognitive mind that doesn't require active thinking. So, silly example, but there's actually lots and lots of that going on all the time. One area that's somewhat complicated in our life where this operates a lot is driving. We make a lot of choices as we drive because we see something, we know what it means, but we might be having a conversation with a friend sitting in the passenger seat, and we're mostly kind of thinking about that. We're not thinking about there's a pedestrian stepping in front of into the crosswalk, so slow down and stop. There's a lot of processing that goes on to make that to do that. But that all happens in this kind of non-thinking world of cognition understanding. And that's a good thing to do. My suspicion is that for most people, this non-thinking place where we know something tends to be wiser than most of our active thinking. It tends to, because a lot of the active thinking that we have is being fueled by things like greed, desires, by ill will, hostility, anger, by fear, anxiety, by confusion and not understanding what's going on. And when it's fueled by that has a very different effect on us when our thinking or knowing is not influenced by those sources. And this deeper way of knowing can be influenced by these emotions, these motivations, but they're much less likely to, and less likely to be driven by them or pushed by them because of the strong compulsive way in which discursive thought spins and runs and it insists and demands almost on the mind, on the heart. And so to learn how to quiet the mind enough to discover what you know before you think it is fantastic. It also can discover that you still can have thoughts, but the thoughts are not stories. Simple thoughts like, it's a door. There's someone else in front of me, I'll step aside, okay? Let me step aside, let someone else go through the door. Those could be thoughts, but it's not a big story of who did what to who. And so so it might be very boring, the thought, let someone else go through the door first. But the richness of how we have a valuable, healthy relationship to the present moment and the people in the present moment belongs closer to that world than the story-making world that we're making up and living by and worried about. And so to be able to quiet enough the mind and start seeing this other way of thinking that's really simple, that's present moment thinking, that's simple statements in the mind or recognitions in the mind, knowing the mind, something that has a chance to be more connected to the deeper knowing within. In the teachings of the Buddha, what happens, what he points out, which I would concur with, is that as the discursive mind of desires and ill will and fear begins to abate, the sense that we're contracted or scattered or agitated by the thoughts dissipates. And thoughts and thinking can now seem like they're happening in a very spacious way. They're there's lots of room for them. And some people actually talk about feeling their mind has become expanded and open. And the mind starts feeling settled or calm. And the atmosphere of calm, the atmosphere of expansiveness of mind, expansiveness of thinking, creates a very different atmosphere within which this deeper knowing can occur. I think then the deeper and deeper sources of knowing that comes out of some of the ways we can be in the world with compassion and love and care and friendliness, with wisdom can operate. So this whole enterprise, this whole approach of becoming mindful of thinking, and really taking time to know how we think and what goes on, and distinguishing different kinds of thinking, is a really important process for coming to tap into the deeper sources of wisdom, of peace, and love, which our hearts are capable of. And have those inform how we think. To have those be the motivation for thinking or the atmosphere for thinking, rather than fear or anger or repression or pain, living in pain and what comes from all that. So that process is a slow process. It's a worthwhile process. It's a process, I think, that occurs as we start practicing mindfulness in all areas of our life. And I hope that the time will come that you will say that it's friendly in there. It's a friendly place in there. You don't mind. Like you and your friends are like best. You and your thinking are kind of like best friends. And you enjoy each other, right? Which I do mostly. I want to say one more thing about this world of thinking that maybe also is a nice experiment to do. That in different settings, different ways, we tap into different cognitive and processing parts of the mind. And so how we understand or come to understanding when we're left to ourselves, just to think by ourselves privately in our minds, it can be very different than how we do so if we're talking out loud. So I found that sometimes when I felt kind of challenged by life circumstances, that I find it useful to, mostly do it when I'm driving, is to talk out loud to myself. Start talking about what's happening in my life. I kind of review it out loud or describe what's happening or my relationship to it out loud. Because I found when I speak out loud, it's like a whole different part of my mind or my heart is engaged than if only involved in discursive thinking, which feels much more, for me, much more limited in quality. Other times, I find that thinking quietly to myself, not talking out loud, it changes where I am. If I'm hiking in the forest, then for me, that's a place where I feel much more peaceful. And it's very reassuring to be in those environments. And so I find that changes how I think. If I'm exhausted, I think a lot more interestingly after I take a nap. And I've been somewhat oppressed by my thinking when I'm sleepy and sleep deprived. And And then I realized, Gil, you're not thinking very well. There's not much hope for you here. Take a nap. And then I take a nap, and then the biggest problem I have with naps is I wake up, but I don't want to get out of bed. I'm just so content, just looking at the ceiling. But then in that contentment, my thinking has changed, and I have a whole different way of thinking. So where you think, how you think, when you think, and whether you think out loud or think privately to yourself, these are all different things that. And also, you might sometimes experiment to do is to put on music. Do you think differently depending on the music you hear? These are all ways of breaking the hegemony of the discursive mind. All these ways of not kind of assuming just because what you're thinking in one way, that's the nature of reality. This is the truth. This has to be the way it is. Don't let your thinking mind have a negative influence on you. Be very careful about that. Don't give it a lot of authority. And if you want to give authority to some deep wisdom you have, to really dip down below that discursive mind. Discursive mind is kind of like a static that interferes with our ability to connect with the deeper sources of wisdom and knowing we can have, and the deeper sources of courage as we live our life. So that's my non-talk. I hope that was okay. Some of you think, so it might be relevant. So it's 10:30. We usually go to 10:45. So if some of you would like to ask questions or commentary or testimonials.
Thank you, Gil.
If you can say your name when you speak, it's kind of nice.
I'm Carla. This was the perfect talk that I needed today. I've been struggling with these oppressive thoughts because I'm going through a very difficult situation, a rift with my best friend. And it seems like I can't bring us back together. And so I have these repetitive thoughts. I should have said this, if only she thought that. And then I'm trying to peel that away. I'm telling myself, okay, I'm defending myself for a reason. Oh, because I'm feeling shame because of the things she said to me. I've been accepting her point of view. Okay, I actually have nothing but goodwill towards her. I could set that aside. But then the feelings of the loss, the feelings of the hurt, they just keep coming back. The feelings seem to be the source causing the thoughts, as opposed to, we usually talk about the reverse. Just won't resolve. Any suggestions?
Yeah, sometimes our emotions are the source for how we think, and sometimes thinking is the trigger for the emotions. And it's fascinating to see which direction it goes at different times. And for you, it sounds like there's something deeply emotional you have to sort through or to heal or understand. So I'm glad that you understand what it is, because that's probably where the work really is. And so since you understand some of them and see them, how they shift and change over time, you're kind of in a that gives you an important kind of options for how to work with this. And one thing you might try doing is spend the next month or so, because this was an important relationship, so you don't want to be in a hurry necessarily to solve it. So spend the next month every day writing a letter to your friend, telling her what you want to, telling her about all this, about how you're feeling, what's going on, your shame, your despair, just write it all in a letter to your friend. Don't send the letter. So let it be uncensored, uninhibited. Just write it there. This is not a time to be censored or be inhibited, or just write what's in your heart. And if you're for example, if you're furious, just write the fury. Just write what's happening, and then maybe each day burn it or throw it away. But do that for a month to really see if you can kind of really get these feelings and emotions really known and expressed and recognized. And because without being really well recognized and given some expression, some respect that way, they might not have a chance to move on to the next thing. All emotions want to move on. That's why they're called emotions. They want to move on, but we tend to bottle them up. We tend to restrict them and hold them back, and we get stuck in them. And so sometimes a safe situation like writing a letter where you just write. So it doesn't have to be a letter to your friend, but some where you write it, and then throw it away. So you don't have to even go back and read it. Just just do the next day, do it again, and see after a month of doing that, see what happens.
That's really interesting. It's like getting those thoughts out, putting them on paper, and then walking away from it.
Yeah. And some people will do this, and actually, they don't just kind of crumple them up and put them in the trash can. They do a little ritual each day. Like maybe, I don't know what the ritual would be, but I've known people who have buried it in a nice place, like a funeral. For something that feels right to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Hi, thank you very much. This is a very, very appropriate topic for me to hear from you today. The wisdom was very, very insightful and very effective. A lot of times, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt
Yes.
about a topic, perhaps maybe health, maybe some other career, issues and so forth, create a, as you call it, discursive thought that just never ends, and it always, an end product of it is just drags you down, and emotionally and thoughtfulness, and it goes from bad to worse, as you call it. So how about the role of fact-finding in trying to alleviate this fear, uncertainty, and doubt, in addition to calming down your mind?
Great, very nice. Well, I think the first fact to be clear about is that you have fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Because to see, this, I don't know about anything else, but I know this is true. Because it's easy to be kind of swept into the uncertainty or the doubt and the fear. And it kind of is pushing us around, guiding us, kind of creating the whole mood that we're in. And we don't, but the idea in mindfulness practice is sometimes take the attention 180 degrees around and look something directly. And maybe what needs to be seen is not the issue you have, like your health issue. The first thing you need to really see is, here is a lot of uncertainty, of fear and doubt. If you see that carefully, then you can start, and then sometimes it's actually good to have some analysis of it. Really think about this a little bit. Wait a minute, I should think about this, or talk to a friend. Here I have uncertainty, fear, and doubt. Does it make sense that I have this? Or does it make sense that I say all three together in one breath? Maybe uncertainty is an ordinary, normal part of human life. Doubt, maybe in some ways, is doubt appropriate? How is it appropriate? Maybe sometimes it's appropriate to have doubt. Fear, well, it's appropriate sometimes, but maybe, I don't have doubt, maybe I have anxiety. Maybe I can have uncertainty without fear. Maybe I can have doubt without fear. What would that be like? It might be that fear is influencing both the doubt and the uncertainty. And so you're kind of like a little package. And as long as you have that package all neatly tied together, there's no hope for you. And so you have to kind of tease it apart. And And like many spiritual teachers talk about the importance of being comfortable with uncertainty, being comfortable with insecurity. And of course, there's a lot of uncertainty in this life. And so if you're always looking for certainty, some people are neurotically looking for certainty all the time. So I don't know if that's your case. And the fear is very important too. If there's a health issue, it's appropriate to have some fear. And but then you distinguish the fear from the anxiety, which has to do with fantasy and projections into the future. What's happening in you? And really stop and look and take a look to go to that 180-degree turn and really study that. And then so that's the first facts to look at. And once you do your homework of doing that, of course, do research. Of course, about the health condition and the situation, and find out. And try to be careful to use good sources. And try to be careful to be discerning what you read. But there's a lot of claims, a lot of people say this is how it is. So you want to kind of always, on what basis? What's the support for their claim? And is it just an opinion? To see the difference between an opinion and a well-supported claim is important, I think. So there's a way of critical thinking and investigation, research that is, I think, a part of a healthy, appropriate life. And if you just kind of, some people never occur to them to do the research themselves, and you just want to trust the doctors, but they have doubts about the doctors, and then they just feel lost in the whole. So please. So that was a long answer. Was that appropriate?
All of the above. Thank you.
Yeah, one more, and then here.
Hi, Gail. The way you explained writing the letter with the discursive thoughts, would that apply to discursive or repetitive worry and thoughts of worry or concern that they're never ending?
Yeah, I think if there's repetitive discursive worry over and over again, keeps coming back, it's a sign that something that we're not understanding the full picture of what's happening with us. And so you want to be able to stop and figure out some way to look under the hood of the car, look underneath and see what's really happening here for us, what's driving it, and what am I avoiding, what am I not seeing? And so there's different ways of doing that, but one possibility is to write about it. Some people, in writing about it, especially if it can be uninhibited, it's just kind of almost like a stream of consciousness, thoughts about the worry and stuff like that, we might be able to start seeing, oh, that's what I'm feeling, that's what's going on for me. I didn't know that.
Thank you.
So does that make sense?
Yes.
Great. And if that doesn't help you, then after a while, don't do it. If it doesn't reveal something or support something, and again, also sometimes, as Carla pointed out, sometimes it's really healthy to have these things expressed, because otherwise, if they're bottled up inside of us, then they can fester in there. But even just talking to a friend about something, or talking out loud in a car, or writing about it, it's kind of like getting it off the chest. And then it can have a very different life inside of us. Things can move again.
I mean, I do think about it, and I do discuss it. But I thought maybe writing it is another level of.
Yes, I think writing is a good thing, especially, as I keep saying, try to do it as uninhibited as possible. Just stream of consciousness, let it just flow. Don't worry if it's true. Don't worry if it's, you're expressing ugly emotions or
if
ugly
I sound
thoughts.
like a crazy don't worry if I sound like a crazy lunatic.
Yes, yeah, you're allowed to be a crazy lunatic when you're writing. And also the grammar doesn't have to be very good.
Spelling too?
Spelling is, doesn't matter. Handwriting doesn't matter. Yes.
Oh, I just want to make a brief comment about the journaling.
I didn't think of it as journaling, but
Oh, well.
I guess that's a big term,
Yeah,
broad term.
I guess that's how I thought about it in my mind, but there's a journaling technique that kind of forgoes what the intellectual enters in, and then you just go more into what's unconscious, subconscious, what's not accessible, is if you just journal with nothing in mind in terms of grammar, the way you're writing, and you go fast. It allows you to go a little bit deeper sometimes.
Nice. Oh, so in terms of thinking and access to interesting things, I find when I exercise, I just give freedom to my mind to think whatever it wants. It's one of the few places where it's got total freedom to just think. Because when I meditate, I'm busy meditating, so the thinking mind doesn't have a free rein. But exercise has a free rein. And then I discover things about what I'm concerned about or what's going on. And it's a very kind of interesting place where to kind of discover, because it's kind of like it's just a free time to think. And otherwise, my life is doing things and thinking about talks I'm supposed to give, or I'm doing things, my mind. But so I think it's a healthy thing to occasionally give your mind complete freedom in a safe environment. Exercising is what I've found is nice, but it might be other times. So thank you. So it's 10:45. It's time to end. And I'll stay here for another probably 10, 15 minutes. If some of you want to come up to the front and continue some of these questions or discussions, you're welcome to come. And thank you for being here.